It's April 1st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with the U.S. Trade Representative's Trade Barrier Report. According to the USTR report, South Korea has pursued policies that prioritize local technology and products over foreign defense technology through its defense offset program. Questions over South Korea's import ban on American beef and its emission-related regulations on imported cars were raised yet again. U.S. President Donald Trump says that there is a communication with North Korea without specifying what exactly that communication is. He also noted he and the leader Kim Jong-un would do something at some point. Students at all but 2 out of 40 medical schools across the country said Monday they are returning to class before the government set deadline for a reinstatement. After boycotting classes over the government's increase in school admissions to address a chronic shortage of doctors. With the Trump administration to announce further tariffs in the coming days, a recent U.S. report on foreign trade barriers is getting more attention. The report states that South Korea's regulations on imported vehicles and pricing of medical products remain as obstacles. Our An Sung-jin starts us off.
The Trump administration is putting scrutiny on South Korea's trade barriers. The United States Trade Representative on Monday local time released a 7-page national trade estimate report, which stated that emissions-related regulations on imported vehicles and the pricing of pharmaceutical products remain a barrier to trade. The U.S. concerns came from a lack of transparency despite South Korea's Clean Air Conservation Act layout, and added that market entry for U.S. automotive manufacturers into South Korea remains a top priority. Korea's prioritization of local technology over foreign technology in defense procurement has also been labeled a barrier. In the case of the pharmaceutical and medical industry, the report said Korea lacks transparency and opportunity for stakeholders to input into proposed policy changes. It also noted Seoul's import ban on American beef from cattle aged 30 months or older, calling the restriction a transitional measure. Other trade barriers include digital trade barriers such as network usage fees that allegedly feed into a monopoly of internet service providers. The USTR releases an annual report to the President and Congress that documents obstacles for U.S. exporters and solutions, including efforts to overcome these barriers. Though these trade barriers have already been brought up in the past, with Trump's hardline tariff impositions, they seem more pertinent. Trump's efforts to impose reciprocal tariffs will resume from the beginning of April. He has stated that further details will become clear between the night of April 1st or 2nd Eastern Time. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
And the price of gold has soared to a new record high ahead of the announcement of reciprocal tariffs by the Trump administration this week. Spot gold prices peaked at $3,128.06 on Monday, continuing a surge that has seen a gain over 18% since the start of the year. Experts say the rise is due to heightened demand as investors seek safe haven assets amid economic uncertainty and escalating global trade tensions. U.S. President Donald Trump has hinted at further engagement with North Korea, confirming ongoing communication with the leader Kim Jong-un. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Monday, Trump said he has a very good relationship with Kim, despite a rocky start during his first term. He said there is a communication, although he didn't clarify whether this was through direct talks with Kim or via aides. Trump described North Korea as a big nuclear nation and called Kim Jong-un a very smart guy. He also said his administration will likely take some action at some point, but offered no specifics. While the record delay in announcing an impeachment ruling for President Yoon is leading to various speculations, the Constitutional Court is reportedly handling the case with a great deal of caution and prudence. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young tells us more.
The Constitutional Court is working cautiously and thoroughly on President Yoon's impeachment case, as speculation continues over when the justices will deliver their ruling. Appearing before the National Assembly on Monday, the Constitutional Court Secretary General Kim Jong-un said the 8-member bench is deliberating with caution in their frequent in-depth reviews and discussions. Kim added even he wasn't informed of how many times the justices convened or what stage they were in their deliberations due to the high level of confidentiality. The justices have been deliberating for more than a month after Yoon's final trial hearing in February, the longest period yet for a presidential case. Once each justice concludes their review and expresses their opinion, the bench is expected to draw up their collective decision before announcing the ruling date 2 to 3 days in advance. While some believe the ruling could be as early as this Thursday, if the bench schedules a Friday ruling in line with past presidential impeachments, April 4th and 11th are key dates to watch. But given the record deliberation period, other observers say the verdict could take longer to be issued, as the justices may be sharply split in their opinions on whether or not President Yoon's martial law declaration warrants an impeachment. The court needs at least 6 votes to remove a president. If 3 or more justices are against impeachment, Yoon will be restored to office. At this point, April 18th is broadly considered the deadline for the bench, the date Justices Moon Young-bae and Lee Mi-sun retire. In 2017, the court dismissed President Park Geun-hye on a Friday before Acting Chief Justice Lee Jung-mi stepped down the next Monday. But this time around, the 2 vacancies would leave only 6 justices on the bench, below the 7-member threshold required to deliver a ruling. The opposition Democratic Party has been calling for the urgent appointment of a left-leaning Judge Ma Eun-hyuk to secure a 6-vote majority to impeach the president, as an early election would favour their party leader Lee Jae-myung. The DP has also been pushing to amend the Constitutional Court Act to extend the retiring justices' terms. The Court Secretary General said while the suggestion is under internal review, there is no official position yet. When asked if President Yoon's ruling would be made by the 18th, the Court Secretary General said the aim is still to issue a verdict as swiftly as possible, but declined to specify a date. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
So the last day of March has passed, meaning the final call will be made in April this month. Let's turn to Professor Lee Hyun for more this morning. Welcome back, Professor Lee.
Well, thanks for having me on the program.
Good morning. There are calls that the Constitutional Court should issue a statement and explain the reasons for such a long delay. Isn't that rare for the court to issue an explanation?
Absolutely. The court is not really in the business of making announcements about, why there's a delay in the ruling because, for several reasons. Most specifically, you want to avoid speculation and misinformation. The court is in the business of making decisions, and I know everyone is very curious, court watchers and as well as pundits. And the media, of course, is very keenly interested in when the court is going to actually release its decision. But the fact that there's been a delay, everyone's speculating as to the reasons why. And so if the court goes ahead and makes an announcement at this point about and tries to explain the delay, I think that will cause a lot of confusion in terms of what the court is trying to accomplish, which is essentially to make the decision as to whether or not President Yoon should be removed from office. And so it's highly unlikely that the court would come out with a specific explanation as to providing the reasons for why the court has yet at this point delayed its ruling on the decision on Yoon's impeachment.
Well, some of the experts I've talked to, they say Yoon's case is not as complicated as that of former President Park Geun-hye. They've expressed, frustration over the delay. I'd like to hear what's your take on this?
Right. As you noted, a lot of people have thought maybe this was a slam dunk case. Basically, this should be an 8-0 decision. But as people have sort of gone through and thought through as to, the reasons why there's a delay, that there's speculation, of course, that this case is more complicated, maybe more than it seems on its face, because, when judges come to a decision like this, obviously a very politically highly charged case, but also potentially, certain legal complications may arise. There's been talk, at least among legal scholars, that this case could potentially be dismissed by a certain number of the judges. And, obviously, when you think about this case, you think about progressive judges, you may think of conservative judges, think about what those judges are, focusing on in terms of their understanding of the case and its implications for not just the legal implications, but obviously also for the political implications. And so, and then I think in this case, the delay is actually indicating that there's more complications here than it meets the eye. And I think that's where we're at right now with this particular decision.
Well, that is why a ruling date is still up in the air. But I have to ask, as a legal expert's point of view, when do you think the court will or maybe must announce a ruling date to prevent any more confusion, instability, and impatience among people?
Yeah, that's a difficult question in some part because the court can obviously take its time, but there's that time window, 180 days, and now we're not just talking about that deadline, but we're also talking about the impending retirements of two justices on the 18th of April. So if the court is going to make a decision at this point, it's going to have to make it before the 18th when the two justices will have to retire because their terms are over. But I mean, a point of fact, if the court is unable to come to some consensus, and my assumption is that there's really furious discussion happening within the court as to the merits as to why President Yoon should be impeached or why he shouldn't. And if the court's desires to achieve consent or at least some unanimity, then this may take longer than we expect. But at some point, the court's going to have to make a decision. So the best guess, of course, at this point is that before the two justices will have to retire, that's when the court will make its decision. So we can look forward maybe to potentially before the 18th of April.
And the opposition Democratic Party has designated today, April 1st, as the deadline for Prime Minister Han Duck-soo to appoint Justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk. And they were warning that it would make a major decision if Han doesn't appoint Ma. Does that mean another impeachment motion, the Prime Minister Han Duck-soo?
Well, certainly it's possible, but it's hard to imagine that he'd be impeached again, given the fact that he was, of course, vindicated by the court. So
Right.
The fact that they would actually try to do this again, I think, had obviously severe political implications. But the legal side of things, the court has already said that while it was unconstitutional for him to not appoint Judge Ma to the bench, that the court was not in a position to force the prime minister, the acting president in this case, to make that appointment. So I think they're basically posturing at this point in terms of threatening impeachment because I don't think it's going to happen. And also, if it goes back, I think the political damage to the Democratic Party would be severe.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong here. It looks highly unlikely that Han will appoint Ma. But let's say Han does appoint Ma. Can Ma play an active role in the ruling? And if so, to what extent do you think?
I mean, he wouldn't be able to unless they sort of reintroduced all the evidence and he was present for the hearings. I mean, at this point, his involvement, his appointment would really have no impact on the decision of the impeachment because he was not involved in any of the deliberative processes, but also the investigations itself. So I don't anticipate that he would, if he was on the bench, that he would play a role in the actual decision.
Alrighty, Professor Yi, it was good to have you with us again. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with us this morning. We appreciate it.
My pleasure always.
Medical students who boycotted classes over the government's medical school admissions increase say they will be back in school just right before the government imposed a deadline for reinstatement on Monday. Our Isung has more.
Out of 40 medical schools nationwide, students from 38 of the schools have decided to return to class before the Monday deadline imposed by the government. According to sources familiar with the matter, 38 of the medical schools saw almost all of their students who had been on leave of absence complete their registration to return to school. Among the schools that saw their students register for classes before the deadline were Seoul National University, Yonsei University, Korea University, Sungkyunkwan University, and Busan National University. The two medical schools where students hadn't registered before the deadline were Inje University and Halim University. The government last month set a March 31st deadline after it announced a conditional decision to set the medical school admissions quota at 3,058 for the 2026 academic year. That is similar to the figure before the current administration decided to increase admissions by 2,000 a year ago. In order to transition into the delayed school semester, most medical schools will begin with a few weeks of online classes. Seoul National University announced last week that online classes will be held for the first 1 to 2 weeks starting Monday. Ulsan University and Korea University have started online classes as well. Yonsei University, which was among the first medical schools to announce a full return of students, will conduct both online and offline classes. Based on data on the number of medical school students returning, the Ministry of Education will finalize the enrollment quota for next year's admissions by the end of the month. While the government expects the medical admissions quota to return to 3,058, it warned that the quota could return to 5,058 if students take a leave of absence or boycott classes after returning. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
With the main blaze of the deadly wildfires contained here in South Korea, South Korean authorities are now looking into what caused the crisis. A man tending a family grave is suspected of sparking one of the fires. Lee Soo-jin reports.
South Korean police, along with the National Forensic Service and firefighting authorities, have launched their first joint investigation into the country's worst ever wildfire. Police in Gyeongsangbuk-do province on Monday morning, using drones, began conducting on-site inspections in Ucheongun County, the ignition site of the wildfire in the province, to determine what caused it and the direction in which the fire spread. The fires in Gyeongsangbuk-do province saw about 480 square kilometers of woodland affected, equivalent to 80% of the size of Seoul, and left 26 people dead. The police plan to examine traces of flames left on the trees around the tomb and the surrounding areas to determine the direction that the fire spread, and search the area around the site of the ignition to find any evidence of materials that may have caused the fire. Analysis of the evidence found from the on-site inspections is expected to take at least 3 weeks. The police revealed on Sunday that they booked a 56-year-old man on Friday without detention on charges of starting the fire on March 22nd while tending to the grave of his grandparents. The man denies the charges. On Saturday, the police found a lighter that was found at the scene and has requested analysis from the National Forensic Service for fingerprints or DNA evidence. With the main fires in both Gyeongsangbuk-do and Gyeongsangnam-do provinces now contained, the government is also focusing on helping those affected. This includes providing temporary housing and livelihood support for those who have been displaced. More than 3,000 houses were completely burned down, and significant damage was also inflicted on 30 national heritage sites and 2,000 agricultural facilities. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Rescue efforts continue in Myanmar with the 72-hour golden time period since the magnitude 7.7 earthquake struck the Southeast Asian nation last week now passed. According to AFP on Monday, rescue teams and citizens in the city of Mandalay continue to search for survivors in sweltering heat above 40 degrees Celsius. Rescue personnel are also struggling to search through rubble due to a lack of manpower and equipment. Myanmar's military government says over 2,000 are dead and more than 3,900 injured. It also announced it would observe a week-long national mourning period. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates that the final death toll could surpass 10,000.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Beginning in Europe, foreign ministers from 6 European countries convened in Madrid, where they urged Russia to agree to an immediate unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine. The foreign ministers of Germany, France, Italy, Poland, Spain, and the United Kingdom, along with the European Union's High Representative, met in Madrid on Monday local time to address the war in Ukraine. In a joint statement, they collectively urged Russia to abandon its delaying tactics and respond to Ukraine's commitment to peace by agreeing to an unconditional full ceasefire. The statement highlighted the importance of making progress within a specific time frame, and they also considered possible new sanctions to increase pressure on Russia. The possibility of using frozen Russian sovereign assets to aid Ukraine was also discussed. The ministers said they will ensure Russia's full accountability for its war crimes. Meanwhile, in France, leader of the right-wing National Rally Party and presidential hopeful Marine Le Pen has been convicted of embezzlement and barred from running in the 2027 presidential election. Le Pen has denounced the court's decision as politically motivated and says she will appeal the ruling.
What she is doing here is she's saying, I'm going to make you ineligible straight away, and I'm doing it precisely to stop you from being able to be elected president. If that's not a political decision, I don't know what it is.
On Monday local time, a French court found Le Pen guilty of embezzling European Union funds. The court sentenced her to 4 years in prison with 2 years suspended, imposed a $108,000 fine, and prohibited her from holding public office for 5 years. This ruling effectively disqualifies her from the 2027 presidential race. In Lithuania, 3 of the 4 U.S. soldiers missing since last week have been found dead. According to a U.S. Army announcement on Monday, the bodies of 3 soldiers and an armored vehicle were recovered from a peat bog after days of intense searching using heavy equipment. The soldiers assigned to the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team 3rd Infantry Division had been taking part in a training mission near the border with Belarus when their vehicle was reported missing. Efforts continue to locate the 4th missing soldier while the cause of the incident remains under investigation. Finally, in Japan, Tokyo's cherry blossom season has arrived earlier than usual this year, with full blossom observed over the weekend. The early arrival drew large crowds to popular hanami, or flower viewing spots, across the city on Monday. Parks and gardens throughout Tokyo are experiencing peak bloom, attracting locals and tourists to the seasonal festivities. While cherry blossoms usually reach their peak in late March to early April, the early blooming this year is attributed to warmer temperatures. The country's favorite flower reaching the peak usually signals the start of the new school and business year.
Welcome to April. We'll see a big temperature jump from a chilly morning. However, fine dust from abroad moved in overnight, making the air hazy across the central region. The capital area will see air quality in the bad range all day, while other regions could experience dust spikes throughout the day today. Meanwhile, the dry spell continues with high fire danger. Dry weather advisories are still in place across much of Korea. Please stay extra cautious about fires. And this afternoon, Seoul will get up to 17 degrees Celsius, about 3 degrees higher than yesterday. Southern provinces can expect much brighter skies in the afternoon with an expected high of 15 degrees over in Busan. Then we have some rain in the forecast for tomorrow. Showers will begin in the west and gradually spread across most regions. The amount will not be that much. Meanwhile, temperatures will stay slightly above norms throughout the weekend. However, the large day to night temperature swings will continue, so make sure to dress accordingly to avoid catching a cold.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thank you for watching.